Welcome to AHRC's TV Weekly Roundup. These are the stories covered in this week's program. Lumads killed and displaced in the Philippines, Bangladesh descend into lawlessness and terror. Human rights defender Adilur Khan speaks out. Transformation of justice institutions essential. Interview with Basil Fernando. Indigenous Papuans shot by security forces in Indonesian province of Papua. Welcome to AHRC TV Weekly Roundup. I am Emerine Kharbi. Let's first turn to the Philippines. Last month, the Hong Kong campaign for the advancement of human rights and peace in the Philippines, along with a number of civil society organizations, including the Asian Human Rights Commission, launched a campaign to stop military harassments and killings of Lumads, an indigenous group in Mindanao. Massive displacement and over a dozen killings have been committed this year by military and paramilitary groups in the area. Excerpts of a statement released during the launch reads, "The indigenous peoples of Mindanao are being terrorized by military and paramilitary forces that are under the responsibility of President Aquino as Commander-in-Chief. They need to be reined in from committing more human rights abuses and be held accountable for grave crimes that occurred in furtherance of the counter-insurgency plan, Oplan Bayanihan, that is conducted to support the administration's policy of opening up ancestral domains to large-scale mining operations. The climate of impunity pervading the country's justice system fosters human rights violations on a daily basis. As human rights and peace advocates, we urge the Philippine government to investigate fully and with transparency the killings of Lumads and bring the perpetrators to justice. Pull out military troops from the Lumad areas and stop the occupation of schools and the harassments and intimidation of the community. Dismantle all paramilitary forces, especially the Magahat Bagani paramilitary force. Work towards the resumption of the peace negotiations with National Democratic Fund of the Philippines and Oplan Bayanihan and allow for the safe return of Lumad refugees to their life and livelihood in their ancestral lands." Here is Abina Rambao from Moro Women's Center in the Philippines.
At present, the Philippine government have a planned program. This is called Oplan Bayanihan. Which resulted rampant, strong, and massive evacuation to the Lumad community. Also resulted many killings in the community. And how to clear the area? It's because of mining. The Philippine government now deploys 60% of his armed forces of the Philippines to the Lumad community and make them harass the Lumad people to their own home.
Next, AHRC TV speaks with Adilur Rahman Khan to find out more about recent disturbing patterns of human rights violations in Bangladesh. Adilur also explains more about far-reaching government crackdowns on civil society organizations in the country. Adilur questions the possibility of a return to democratic rule without functioning justice institutions. Here is Adilur.
The patterns are like enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killings, custodial torture, massive custodial torture, and along with that, when law enforcement agency people detain someone, that person in many occasions are shot at their limbs so that that person becomes permanently maimed and he is not treated properly, and there are fabricated cases against that person. So this is a kind of tactics used by the law enforcement agencies to scare people who are kind of protesting or have alternative voices about the policies of the government. So this technique law enforcement agencies are using. It's a very difficult situation because the rule of law is not there. So when you have a situation where rule by force is continuing, the law enforcement agencies use that situation, and a section of the law enforcement agencies who are aggressively kind of doing all kinds of violations that is making the whole country, the whole situation vulnerable, and that is the state of Bangladesh today. So it's important to note that when we see the collaboration of various international actors in respect of providing training or providing assistance to the law enforcement agencies or providing equipments to the law enforcement agencies in Bangladesh, it's important to examine that how far these equipments, these trainings, these supports were used to develop the law and order situation by training the law enforcement agencies, or how much these were used to suppress people's voice or suppress the human rights defenders or to suppress political dissent. The vocal civil society organizations who work with the victim families, who work with the kind of people who are sufferers or raise awareness about the human rights issues or talk about kind of civil and political rights, workers' rights, even environmental rights. These organizations are targeted. These organizations are vulnerable. The new NGO legislation, which is almost at the final stage, will cripple the independent voices in Bangladesh, and it's waiting to be enacted as law at the parliament. So Bangladesh will see possibly soon that the independent civil society voice is not there anymore. Those organizations who are speaking against atrocities of the law enforcement agencies, like I've mentioned, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, custodial torture, civil society space, or freedom of expression and association, these organizations are targeted. Bangladesh was born out of the liberation struggle, where millions of people became victims, sacrificed their lives. Bangladesh cannot slide down to a kind of authoritarian rule. Bangladesh cannot slide down to a situation where rule of law will be non-existent. The law enforcement agencies will use their force only to rule the country. This cannot go on, and Bangladeshi people will not take this. To address this challenge, we need to have a kind of free, fair, inclusive election under the supervision of the United Nations, where people can have their right to vote and they will not feel that they are disenfranchised. So this is the challenge, and this form of electoral democracy will ultimately bring the institutions, this form will bring the institutions under the scrutiny and will develop the institutions so that the people's dream to constitute Bangladesh as a democratic state basing on equality, human dignity and social justice will be realized.
Staying on the theme of the importance of functioning criminal justice institutions, Basil Fernando, Director for Policy and Programs at the Asian Human Rights Commission, recently sat down with Per Lagerström from Stockholm-based International Legal Assistance Consortium to discuss the rule of law in Asia. Here is Basil.
You see what is in many of the countries. Now we work in 11 countries in Asia, and I myself have been engaged for more than almost 25 years, and we don't know in detail the ground reality. The fact is that the systems of justice that some have inherited from the colonial times, others have come in other ways, these do not support the rule of law. We misunderstood, and we thought that they are supporting the rule of law.
What are they supporting?
Well, they easily support authoritarian system. Very easy to shift from a colonial system into an authoritarian system. You saw that for a long time in Singapore, but we have seen in other countries, Malaysia, in Burma, in Sri Lanka. So virtually facade of a court exists. And you know, we some call it a phantom limb. So we imagine that we have an arm and we try to use it. In fact, you know, we just go before people and we say that these issues are, but the judges and the prosecutorial systems, the police investigators, they act on some other considerations, some other purposes. So at the end, people waste huge amount of times in what is called a justice system. In a place like India, which is called the largest democracy, it can court case can take 15 years to 30 years or even more. And people are beginning to see this. The good thing about Asia is that as compared to 50 years ago, today's generations are highly educated. There's a massive change of education in the year. Added to that, of course, like globally, the communication revolution, people want something more genuine, something that tangible, and an expansion of their freedom, and to participate in their life and to live peacefully. For this, the legal systems do not help. So change in the legal system is a must. Unfortunately, many people with very good intentions come from developed countries. They think if we tell these people this is the good system we have in our country, they can also use it, and they try to do this without understanding what is there on the ground. You cannot transform by superimposing. Transformation requires whatever that is there to be displaced, and displacement don't take place. So virtually for sometimes some facade is fixed and people are happy. Now there was this happened, they passed the law. See, there is a huge gap between the law and law enforcement. You can have a law against torture, but the police routinely on a daily basis can commit torture, and this law cannot be used to stop it. Assumption that if you make a law, it means that you made a change is a false assumption in a situation like that. Law enforcement has to be changed, but that will change only if the institutions which work on it, the police who are supposed to do proper investigations into violations of rights or crimes, the prosecutors who must uphold the rule of law, and the judges who must adjudicate in fairness. If these things are not working, what you get at the end the results is, in the name of justice, creating injustice.
I think many listening to you will agree. So how should an international organization or an organization from a developed country that would like to assist, how would that assistance need to be designed?
Yeah, the approach that we have adopted is, first of all, we should have a close relationship with the people who are working on the ground to help the victims. That can be lawyers, that can be civil society organizations, it can be various bar associations, and also some of the judges and others who are in fact trying to push change. Listen to them, understand what is the wrong. Like a doctor listen to the patient and understand the illness. If you try to treat a patient without knowing what the illness is a great disaster. And that is what is happening in the name of democratic interventions and things like that. So, and the people, we have in Asia a situation where people are eager to talk. They are willing to tell, these are the problems. So, if we have a dialogue, improve the dialogue, understand what is there, and then bring your resources, bring your history, the great history by which freedoms have been defended. But the mere institutional form without history is just nothing. So, but you cannot bring history without understanding other person's history. It is this, if it happens, there is a huge potential in these areas, and the people, the most important factor for democracy is the people. People want democracy, and the agents of democracy are many, but the agents of democracy this side of the globe and the other side of the globe must listen to each other. And if this begins to happen, we will be contributing not only to a change here, but to a global level, a better discourse on these matters.
Finally, to Indonesia, where 2 indigenous Papuan high school students have been shot in Timika in Papua province. 18-year-old Caleb Zarabagao has died, while 17-year-old Fernando Zabarofek has been seriously injured and is presently hospitalized. The shooting took place early in the evening on September 28 after Indonesian police officers surrounded a building where the 2 victims and their friends were sitting. The youth scattered and the 2 were shot. The police claims to have been searching for youth groups who had caused public disorder. Later that evening, friends and family of the 2 victims protested and surrounded the police station. This angered the police, resulting in further shootings which injured several protesters. No official investigation has yet been conducted by the police, and even the National Commission on Human Rights has yet to investigate this case. The AHRC has documented frequent police brutality in Papua and West Papua provinces of Indonesia. Current Indonesian President Joko Widodo promised during his presidential campaign to treat indigenous Papuans equally with other Indonesians. However, Widodo has been in power for a year now, and human rights violations committed by the state security forces continue. That is all for this weekly roundup. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.